And good afternoon. And I'd like to welcome you today. The reason we're doing this so soon after the last one is there's still been a lot of questions and ambiguity as to the uses of masks and the enforcement procedures and such. And we've been getting tremendous amounts of emails and questions about what the issues are and how do we resolve it and what's being done on the island. So I thought the best thing to do is use my commissioner hat, maybe a little influence, and I asked the Chief of Police, Bryan Pegues, if he wouldn't mind coming here with us today and answering some of these questions. And as you'll hear, quite a few of the answers will be common sense answers more than the rules and regulations at certain times. But I want to just briefly tell you some of the new implementations we're doing on the island, because I think the chief would want to hear this because it may help him in how he sees the relationship. We've been working together for years on the island. He has a phenomenal relationship with Dan, our chief of security, and they've been fantastic to work together with us in implementation, enforcement, and doing things like today, coming here to work with us. So some of the things that will be going into effect based on the seriousness and unfortunate passing of a very, good friend of all of ours, we will be implementing immediately that there are going to be full-time patrols, not of the police, but of our own security driving the property. There's 2 full-time patrols, and the first time they stop you, it's going to be with a warning and a card explaining what the rules and regulations are. Second time, there will be a $100 fine. It can be disputed by going to the board and to the grievance committee, but we feel if you do it the second time, you're really endangering people's lives. Now, what are the rules? We have implemented inside gym, inside the buildings, any interior location is a mandatory, you must have a mask. When you're outside and you're exercising, you don't need a mask if you can social distance while you're doing that. However, there's also the common sense gray area of that. Exercising to a 20-year-old is not the same as exercising to a 60, 70-year-old. So if you see somebody walking and they're older, obviously they can't wear a mask, but they're exercising. If you see a 20-year-old and they're running, they're exercising, they don't need the mask. But we would want them to keep a mask on them someplace where if they get into a situation where they can't social distance or they stop and they want to talk to their friends, they have the ability to put the mask back on. If you're walking a dog or you're pushing a baby carriage, obviously you should definitely have that mask on at that time. So we're going to talk about some of these things in further detail with the chief, because I think it's important that some of the things we hear today are based on what is the county ordinance, what are the rules and regulations, what is the city going to do about this, what should they do if there's a problem, etc. So I'm introducing you to the chief of police. He's my boss. He tells us all what to do and whatever, but he also, I will tell you, and I want to just on a side note compliment the chief, because we had an incident on the island. And interestingly enough, it was in Villa Flora, and we had somebody who came in on the property and was threatening somebody else pretty seriously, broke windows on a car, et cetera, and 3 or 4 of the officers did come to take care of the problem, and it was a serious problem. And I will compliment you and your men, because I want to tell you they had every right in the world to apprehend this man, take him into custody, put handcuffs on him, because he was violent, he was breaking car windows, he was cursing, he was using every name you could, every derogatory name. And yet, and I wrote the chief, there were 4 men that never touched him, never went near him, and by the end of the 45-minute confrontation, the man apologized and left without any further incident. And I have to tell you, when we hear on the news about all this rioting and everything going on, I must tell you, I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying this to compliment our police department for the restraint and the professionalism. And that's because of this gentleman sitting next to me right now. So I want to thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner. It's my pleasure to be here. For those of you that do not know me, I'm Chief Bryan Pegues of the Aventura Police Department. And it's my honor to serve this great community. I've been here for about 25 years since the city started, and I've seen it grow from a small bedroom community into one of the premier communities here in South Florida, if not the nation. And it's a real gem of an area. And our police officers work extremely hard day in and day out to serve and protect everybody here, and especially in these challenging times with the advent of COVID, and we're dealing with exposure to our officers and the precautions that they have to take. These are challenging times, but that's our calling. We're here to serve, and we're happy to do so.
Well, you're amazing, and I thank you. Now, some of the questions we get, and let's start with the most basic one. What is the county ordinance in regard to mask wearing, interior, exterior, and let's say in a gym?
Okay, so our city ordinance, City of Aventura, mirrors what the county ordinance is, and our ordinance for right now is that when you're outside, mask wearing is required. Also, inside of gyms, mask wearing is required. I know there's been some talk, especially in some questions, and if you want me to just jump ahead, and some of the questions that I get, and some of the questions that I'm sure are on everyone's minds. But before I get into that, I just want to say, and I think what we need to do, and especially during this time with this virus, is we need to listen to the experts. The doctors, the CDC, their recommendations for how to stop the transmission of this virus. And that is social distancing, staying 6 feet apart, and when you're not unable to do so is the mask wearing in public. Now, one of the things that I find that's very troubling, and it hits home, and I can speak from relevance to all of you, is here in Dade County, we have over 87,000 positive cases. Wow. And it's growing each and every day. There's over 1,000 deaths here in Dade County. We make up 20% of the deaths statewide here in Dade County. As of earlier today, there was about 360,000 plus cases in the state of Florida, and growing exponentially. Part of that is because of the increase in testing. But one of the things that's troubling, and that we found in the police department, is a lot of people, especially the younger population, are asymptomatic. Now, you don't know you have it, but you're speaking to somebody. You may cough, you may be running or exercising in your close proximity to somebody for a long period of time, whether it's a family member, friends, neighbors, whatever it may be, and you can transmit that virus. And we found that in our police department. We've been very diligent in testing everybody and getting regardless. And we've had a couple positive cases, and we found that a lot of people through testing had no symptoms but were asymptomatic, and were able to transmit that through other people. So that being said, inside of gyms. Now, I know, especially on the island, there's a lot of control and regulations that you can put onto your gyms. But in all reality, if somebody is running, sprinting, jogging on a treadmill, the reality is it's going to be very difficult to be wearing a mask. Or if you're on an exercise bike and you're doing a spinning class, or you're doing something with that effect, and you're vigorously exercising, just like as if you were outside. So, to mitigate those, procedures or protocols put in place where there's either spacing, where there's nobody that is around those individuals, partitions. We put that up in our police department in some of our public areas that we have to deal with the public, is putting up, and they're relatively inexpensive. There's companies out there that make them, putting in partitions that separate individuals, or especially if they're breathing hard or sweating, and those type of things. And then the protocols that all businesses have to have for reopening is the sanitation requirements before and after. So I think that there's ways, if everybody comes together, to look at how can we manage this safely, taking into account the guidelines, people trying to get back to as much normalcy as possible. Because it looks, this has been going on for some time now, and people are scared, they're frustrated, they don't know when this is going to end. And I wish I could tell you, this is the date, it's going to be over, we're going to go back to 100% normalcy, but I can't do that.
Yeah.
So in doing so, I think that we can be reasonable. There is a curfew in effect. Miami-Dade County has a county-wide curfew that's in effect until 10 p.m. at night. Now, a lot of people, and the commissioner is exactly right. So sometimes if an older couple is outside, they may be exercising, have your mask with you. Everybody's very easy when you go outside. Nobody forgets their cell phones.
Yeah.
In this day and age, until this passes, it's just like grabbing your cell phone. is to have that mask, that added level of protection, and to be a good community. And that's why Aventura is so special. And we've seen it time and time again when we've had natural disasters, when there's hurricanes, when there's other crises that we had in the islands, in the Bahamas. I've never seen a community that has come together so
Yes.
quickly to help other people. And it speaks volumes for who we are as Aventura. And going and doing that too, and wearing that mask, I think we can all do that, and to have that added level of protection.
So let me ask you to go back to the gym, because that brings up one of those ambiguous gray areas. If you're on a treadmill, the mandate says that everybody, no matter what they're doing inside, wears a mask.
Correct.
But you're saying, and I'm not taking it for gospel, I'm just saying, using the common sense point of view and the health standpoint, if we're able to put up plastic, separate the treadmills, and do proper social distancing in something on a strenuous exercise like that, it would be all right to not have the mask on even, or is it subject to how much social distancing?
It's subject to a bunch of factors, and I don't want to give a broad answer and superseding a county ordinance, but there's been other gyms and there's other facilities that have taken approaches that are reasonable. So you have the ability to, maybe people that are using the treadmills or the spinning bikes, that those are allotted at certain times and limited to a certain amount of people. So when we're doing the treadmills, when we're doing the spinning bikes, these are the times that we do it. These are the guidelines that we have in place, and people know ahead of time that this is what to expect when going in. You may want to have hours where it's just using the exercise equipment, so people can go in there, wear a mask, and they know that during those times that's going to be in effect. The sanitation and the cleaning, the wiping down afterwards is extremely effective and recommended by the CDC. And those are some of the protocols that you can take. So there's creative ways of doing things. And I know with the ordinance, with the county ordinance, with our city ordinance that mirrors the county ordinance, it'd be impossible to go into every situation, into everybody's building or everybody's community and say X, Y, answer every question. But these are the guidelines, and we have to work around those guidelines. And if people can't do it, then there's consequences, like you said, what you're going to be doing on the island and enforcing. But each individual building can come up with their own methodologies to safely work out an exercise and being reasonable.
But there is no exception, from my understanding and from yours obviously too. If people are just socializing, if they're playing cards, if they're having a conversation, if they're walking a baby dog, then there's no gray area.
Correct.
You must wear a mask.
Correct.
And there's no ifs, ands, and buts about that.
Correct.
If it's inside of a gym and it's exercising, serious exercise, heavy breathing, and we can social distance and petition.
Correct.
So it's almost like one person on a bike by themselves. Possibly we could do something like that, and that's something we'd have to look into with our spa. At this point, what we've done is we've limited the number of people at any given time into the spa. We wipe down after everybody uses the equipment, but at 12 o'clock or thereabouts, we shut the whole spa down. Everyone has to leave, and we totally clean the entire spa for an hour. Then we open it up for another limited amount of people again. We've tried to do most of the heavy stuff outside, like we brought our bikes outside. So in a spin class, they're socially distanced, and then they have the exterior with fans, so the need for the mask goes away, because obviously it's outside and you can't. So we're trying to do all these things. But another question that does come up, and one of the reasons we as an island have decided to do this patrol and to not want to fine, but if need be, fine people, is because we want to take the burden off the responsibility of the police department. Because we feel they have a lot more important things to do than coming onto the island and giving people citations for a mask issue. So, but I do understand that there is that ability now, so maybe you could explain what the county has given us permission to do as a police department.
So, with the emergency order that's in effect for the mask wearing, the fines are as follows. We're able to, now there's been an amendment that was passed at the last county commission, and that allows us as a municipality to issue citations, civil citations, in lieu of making an arrest for an emergency order for noncompliance of the city manager and the mayor's executive order, and that is a $100 fine for a violation of not wearing a mask or in violation of the emergency order for an individual, and then there is a $500 fine for businesses that do not comply with the emergency order. So those are first-time offenses that allow us to do.
And now because of your inter-county agreement,
Correct.
Aventura can do that same thing.
Correct.
I see. So that answers, because I know some of the people have been asking, who do we call? Well, I think what we've established and what we're starting as of today is before you call the police, call Dan, let your building manager know who the person is. Dan will then be notified, and we'll try to handle it through our own internal system before we interfere and get the city involved with that. And I think that's important because I think you've got your hands full with what's going on.
We do.
Now, another question somebody asked is they're outside, they drive around, they walk the circle, they drive the circle, and they don't see any enforcement. And again, it goes to these people are running the circle because they're exercising.
Correct.
So maybe you want to just talk briefly about that.
So if you're on the exercise circle, we consider that you're exercising. Whether people are walking, running, biking, what we do ask again, and is that if you are on the circle, that you do have a mask with you at all times, and people that are in groups larger or in groups that cannot social distance, or if they're going to be communicating, that they wear a mask if they can't properly social distance. As far as enforcement, I can tell you that in the past 3 months, we have responded and handled just with COVID-19 related, either not social distancing, business violations, not mask wearing, responses of over 70 complaints or 70 responses to the public, and that doesn't even account for our bike officers that were going around riding, giving out warnings, talking to people, making sure that they social distance, going into to the local businesses to make sure that they are complying with the orders as well. So we have been doing, but unfortunately what we find is a lot of times a snapshot in time.
Yes.
And you will have, for example, there may be 6 or 7 people that happen to congregate for a moment or two, and somebody takes a picture or somebody sees this and calls us, but by the time that we get there, they're gone. So those are part of the issues that we're dealing with. It's a little bit different, especially on private property. We have, because oftentimes, surprisingly, that on private property where masks are mandatory, especially someplace like the Aventura Mall or some type of business, 99% of the people come in and comply with it, but on occasion there are people that refuse to do so. We get called to them, and some of these individuals, I don't know what their ulterior motives are, but they become either violent, disruptive, refuse to comply, and leave, and we've had to take enforcement action in those situations. And we've had quite a handful of those that we've had to deal with in conjunction with a lot of other things. And not to get too much off topic, but just so the public knows what we're out doing, and especially for the past 4 or 5 months, we've implemented a crime prevention initiative where we've reallocated a lot of our officers into undercover plainclothes details to prevent crime. Because I know it's hard to believe, but in times of crisis, and especially times like this, criminals or opportunists look at this to prey upon other people and to commit crimes. And we've been seeing that throughout the county. There's been violent crime and people trying to do that, and trying to come in here and do certain things. We've had a couple of high-profile incidents that occurred at the Aventura Mall, and we've done a lot to address that. So a lot of our resources would go into businesses and making sure that people are complying, but have been going into preventing crime, and our officers have been doing a fantastic job doing that. We've made dozens and dozens of exceptional arrests for people in stolen vehicles, people with guns, people with all kinds of, they are coming here for illicit purposes, and preventing that to make sure that our community is safe. So those are some of the things we're having to deal with in this day.
And it's amazing because I know I was talking to the city manager about it, and in Aventura Mall, where you wouldn't expect a lot of this to be going on, I mean, thanks to what the chief said about being undercover and doing these things, the license plate, the recognition, et cetera, I can't believe how many people have been arrested either from out of state or they're coming here intentionally for that one reason, with guns, with whatever, or obviously with not a good intent, and yet the police have stopped every single one. We have not had an incident yet inside the mall except for that drug deal that went bad, which actually they just chose a place to go and it happened to be our mall. But without exception, even with shots being fired, the only one hurt was one of their own people. And our police never had to fire a shot, never had to do anything, and everybody was apprehended.
And within 20 seconds,
Yeah.
everybody was apprehended. And
So, I mean, that's the beauty of what is going on. So I know one of the questions that we get asked quite a bit is what is happening out in the city. We have an agreement with the City of Aventura. Even so, we are private property. They have absolute permission to come on the property, patrol the property, go around, even on occasion, give tickets, but mainly to keep us safe. And that relationship has been an amazing relationship that we've enjoyed for many, many years. So, in terms of just a summation of what we do on an island like this, with 4,000 or 5,000 people, we have so many different types of facilities. We have a set of rules and regulations. I think we have gone above and beyond, and fortunately, and thank God, we've had minimal cases, which unfortunately may not continue, as we're starting to see. But I think common sense seems to be the most important rule that people tend to not follow through with. And just how would you say to them what they should do using common sense rather than worrying about what the county tells us to do?
I would look at it I look at it now, and I think all of us, and so some of our younger generation, and we were all this way when we were younger. You think you're invincible and nothing can ever happen to you.
I still think that way.
So,
at least we try to.
And we tend to flaunt the rules. But all of us have either family members that we know that have either pre-existing conditions or are more at risk. And if you look at the statistics, and I look at them every single day, and I was looking at through the state of Florida, and you look at the population that is being hospitalized predominantly, and especially in the bar graph, the Department of Health and the CDC keep excellent statistics. For those 55 and older, they make up the majority, or if not almost all, of the hospitalizations in the state of Florida from this. And we all have family members, and a lot of what we're finding is that a lot of the younger individuals are asymptomatic. So we have to take into account everybody's well-being, wearing a mask, having it with you, knowing that it could be your family, it could be your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, that's somebody else that doesn't want to wear a mask or feels that it's not within their purview to do so, can infect somebody, and that person can go in the hospital. And you mentioned something earlier that at the beginning of our conversation that really hit home. When you have somebody who you care about that gets this virus, that it hits extremely hard, and we have an employee, a friend of mine, young, healthy, but it just happened to hit extremely, extremely hard, where that person was to the point where had to get blood transfusions and was extremely sick, and they were hospitalized multiple times, and you see the struggles that they go through, and their parents go through, and their family, their loved ones go through. It really hits home. And having this mask and putting that on can prevent somebody from getting sick that has the proclivity to really have a serious effect of this virus. And when you start seeing it hit home, and the hospitalizations and our ALFs that are going throughout the state, it's the right thing to do. And I think all of us want to do the right thing, and we will do the right thing, and we'll get through this. And just having that mask with you, putting it on, it becomes, at first doing it and having to wear it all the time, especially us as officers, every time we have to get out of the car, and we're interacting with the public, and we're going to calls where people are have a medical condition or a medical distress, and having to wear all these different precautions. It starts to become common to do it, and at first it's inconvenient, but don't let that inconvenience get somebody sick.
Well, and just to touch on what you just said, my son unfortunately got the virus. And he works with Apple, so he's in a lot of his districts, so he's in a lot of the stores, and they are as careful as can be. They have shields, they have masks, they have everything you can imagine. He goes from there to home, doesn't do anything else, and yet somehow he got it. Thank God he's just tested negative now. So,
Right.
but even so he's negative, the after effects, he can't get his strength back yet, he's weak, it's still,
Right.
that doesn't go away right away. And when you see it, now I haven't been able to visit him, obviously, because I can't see him, which even makes it worse.
Right.
But you do, when it hits home, you realize it's a reality. And it's like we said, this should be no different than a telephone anymore. But, and it's, to me, it's, as we said, it's common sense. When you go in a gym, you wear your mask. If it's impossible to wear it, we're going to try to make, based on your suggestions, we're going to look at that very carefully. As of now, though, when you're in that gym, you wear a mask. When you're walking in the community and you're exercising, you bring it with you in case you can't social distance. If you're outside exercising and you're on a tennis court, obviously you're social distancing and it's not expected. But, we can set up all the rules we want and you can enforce all of them you want, but the problem is there's not enough security in the world
Right.
to stop stupidity and people from being inconsiderate. And the most dangerous thing is they're not getting themselves sick. It's someone else that will get sick from what they're doing. And that's the unfortunate part of what's going on. And I think that's what you're saying.
That's exactly right.
People must use common sense. And that's why I wanted you to be here today, because I've been asked this question. And the enforcement, you understand, we will try to alleviate some of the need for the city. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. But the city is not here to enforce until we need them to enforce. We have to, as neighbors, as friends, enforce, take the advice of our chief, do what's right, because we're only saving our own lives and our families' lives. And that's really, as he said, when it hits home, as it did on this island, we see the results. And whether it was carelessness, whether it was accident, we don't know how these things happen. There is no playbook for this.
Right.
And this is something that no one has on their resume. I'm sure when you went through the academy, you never thought you'd ever deal with anything like this.
Never in a million years.
Right. And we don't even know when it's going to end.
Right.
So, I mean, I can't even imagine the burden every time an officer has to get out of a car and go stop somebody or talk to somebody, like this day we had here where 4 or 5 officers are trying to
Right.
subdue someone who's absolutely crazed. So, but is there any parting words for us? Any just words of wisdom?
No, I think that we covered everything, and like you said, consideration for others is key. Keeping your mask with you, being able to put that on when you can't socially distance and you're around other people is just key to being successful and for us mitigating this. And the other thing is we have a lot of testing out there now too.
Yes.
And it's imperative, and we have it, especially in our agency, that if you have any type of symptoms, or you're not feeling well, they immediately go and get tested, just to give peace of mind to themselves and their families, but also to everybody else. We have a testing facility over here at Aventura Mall.
Right, and that's something that I wanted to stress. They didn't realize when they shut down the big one,
Right.
there is one by Nordstrom's, I believe, isn't there?
Correct. On the first floor of Nordstrom's, there's a walk-up testing by the Department of Health that's
Great,
there.
and that's important because some of the residents want to know if there's testing. It's right here in the mall, as the chief said, on the first floor of Nordstrom's, that you just go there and walk up and be tested.
Correct.
Yeah, and we just tested the whole island, or the whole staff
Oh, great.
of the island, and we're
Okay.
just waiting for the results. Chief, I can't thank you enough for being here because
My pleasure.
it means so much, because we talk about this, but it's great when the chief enforcer comes as a friend and giving us really what we all know to be the truth.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's my pleasure. And anytime you want me back, I'll be more than happy to come back.
Don't say that.
Okay.
Don't say, be careful what you wish for. But thank you again very
Thank you,
much.
Commissioner.
And thank you all. Please be safe.